This is what Penn State football is up against in the modern age of college football. It was reported that Ohio State spent collectively roughly $34 million on its coaches and NIL for its players. $34 million. But I keep being told it's all James Franklin's fault.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Is James Franklin the problem? Well, depending on who you ask, the answer is going to be different, but we're going to break that down today. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. All you got to do is visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Very special guest today to talk about everything when it comes to NIL, transfer portal, Penn State's position in all of it. And that is former Penn State offensive lineman Landon Tengwall helping me out to break this all down. You can follow him on each and every social. He also has a brand new podcast that he is hosting as well. Landon, thanks so much for the time. And this is an interesting discussion because I had a social media post. You reacted to it. A lot of the Twitter X sphere reacted to it as well. Is James Franklin responsible for where Penn State is being, 10-2, but always being behind Ohio State, right? Consistently. And then Michigan is pulled in front too. And the answer I gave is no, because when you have Ohio State right now collectively spending $34 million plus, this is what Penn State's up against. Okay, so James Franklin is supposed to be the guy that is bringing all this money together. Like, there's all these different components of how to build a great college football program. So yes, James Franklin is responsible for certain elements, of course, but this is the reality of NIL, the transfer portal, and this modern college football, this modern version of college football where he can only do so much. And that's why I say, everyone keeps telling me it's his fault. But look at what Ohio State's doing to get that competitive edge.
Yeah, Zach, I'm a big fan of this topic, and the NIL topic is hot with these Penn State fans. We've seen, a lot of movement with Happy Valley United and Penn State as a whole trying to, fundraise a lot of money. Speaking from a standpoint of it, is it James Franklin's fault? At the end of the day, he's the head man, so that's how it works. If you're the captain, if you're the leader, the fault does go on you. To say that it is fully his fault and that the reason, Penn State is behind the ball in NIL, is it all on him? Absolutely not. He cannot do this alone. He needs help from these big-time donors. We have them. They are here. We need them to step up. I think a big problem with NIL and why Penn State fans have such a sour taste in their mouth right now with NIL is it seems like there is a blame or a responsibility being put on them to say, hey, if we don't get money from you guys and we are not good because we're not getting enough money to pay our guys, it's on the fan base. And that's kind of what it feels like right now. So I think that is obviously not the first way that Coach James Franklin and the NIL collective, they don't want to go that route of having to ask fans to help out. I mean, you really don't want to have to do that. But you don't see Ohio State, you don't see Michigan doing that. I've heard Notre Dame has over $100 million in the reserves. I mean, these programs have a lot of money. So, you start to ask the question, why does Penn State not have this? And I think it goes back to these big time donors. Are you able to get them to write these checks? So and I don't know exactly. So where does that blame fall? I don't know. That's a lot of, behind closed doors type of stuff. But I think donor relations matter more now than they ever have before. Because before, you had the funding, the football team. I mean, it was kind of whatever. You didn't really, if you were James Franklin, having those huge donor relationships and getting a ton of money in. Yeah, if you want to try to get a new weight room or a new locker room passed, you're able to get school funding for that. But now, where we sit today, halfway, towards the end of April, you are still not able to directly pay players as a university. So you're not able to use any type of university funding. You have to go out and you have to fundraise this money. And especially doing that through a third party NIL collective, it makes it even more difficult, especially when you're competing against other teams than other states. Because as of right now, it is state by state if a NIL collective is allowed to be in-house, meaning that the university operates the NIL and is able to facilitate deals and pay the players directly. There are some states where that is now legal. I believe it was Virginia, I think, that just passed on Wednesday. It was a state right near Pennsylvania where they made it fully legal. But in PA, it is still illegal to directly pay players as a university. So, it's very messy. But I like I said, I do not think this is all on James Franklin, but we need this money fundraise. And I don't think the way to go about it is to nickel and dime fans, because you start to alienate your fan base when you're putting this responsibility on them, saying, hey, you guys need to help out or we're going to, not be as great. Look, these fans, if you have season tickets, it is $15,000, $20,000. They have to travel here. We know what hotels are like during state college. I mean, $500 to $1,000 a night. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. Merchandise, travel, all of that. And then you're asking them to throw money on top of that. It starts to get a little dicey, and these fans start to feel a little used. So I think you need to find a new approach, and I don't know what that approach is, but I think it has to be connecting with these big-time donors, and whatever that takes, whether it's having dinners with them weekly, going on whatever, going on a trip with I don't know what that takes, but it needs to be done, because we need these big-time donors. That Ohio State, that Michigan, that Notre Dame, Georgia, they all have them. And we just seem to not have that right now. So we need those help from those big wigs. I mean, obviously, we know how much Pegula is worth. That is someone that we can use. We need him right now. So if you're Coach Franklin, if you're Pat Kraft, if you're those guys, you need to be doing everything possible to be cultivating these great relationships with these big-time donors.
And that's very well put. And that's just it with college athletics in general. There's two factors to it: how much money you have and how much money you are willing to spend. Right. So Penn State, you said it, and I agree with you. Penn State has the money, but how much of that are they willing to spend because of different? Hey, we all know the factors. Like, let's just be honest. There's the base of people. There's a group of people that say, well, historically, Penn State, Joe Paterno would not align with this. They would not like NIL. Okay, that's fine. To an extent, if you want to be traditional in that sense, just know what you're going up against. Just know what you're going up against. And then there's the people that say, hey, I'm not going to donate because it's not my responsibility as a fan. I already buy tickets, parking passes, merchandise. What more can I give where I'm not stretching myself thin? And then there's the people that are like, hey, this is college football. We need to put in as much money as possible. And I'm with the group of, NIL is here. It's here to stay. It's not going away. Even if there is collective bargaining, Landon, I don't think NIL is going to go away. This is just money's just going to change hands with a CBA in college football, whether employees, whatever, all that. That is a different can of worms here. But at the end of the day, right, fans can only contribute so much. Businesses are only going to want to contribute so much. So it's kind of this arms race just to see it. It is bigger than James Franklin. It's bigger than any coach. But if you have the money, you're willing to spend the money, and you have a pretty competent coach, you're going to have championship teams. So it feels like whoever has the most money and is willing to spend it is going to be good at the end of the day. NIL is worse for college football in the sense of just fair and legitimate competition. But I'm glad the players are finally benefiting from it. Just know that you're sacrificing in other places so that people can benefit.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And, I've talked about this with some of the guys. You look, and I mentioned Michigan, Ohio State. You look where Ann Arbor, you look at Columbus. I mean, these are big cities, and they have the infrastructure to support doing NIL deals with paying, these businesses can help out. Most of these businesses downtown State College do not have the funds to really give anything significant.
Yes.
So I think we're also from, a market standpoint, we know what Penn State brings to the table. I mean, the name Penn State, I think it's even bigger than maybe those two teams. But from a standpoint of where we are in State College, Pennsylvania, in the middle of nowhere, with the infrastructure still trying to get built up,
Mhm.
It's just, I think it's more difficult for these guys to do NIL deals that aren't corporate, where it's saying, hey, let's go downtown and go to McClanahan's or somewhere. And it's like, yeah, we
Sure.
have maybe $500 to give you. And it's like, this day and age, dudes want they need 500 grand to
500K.
switch schools.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's what it is. And it's like, you're not, I mean, that's not making any dent, any of these businesses around State College. But I'm sure there is a ton of business owners in Columbus and Ann Arbor that just have money coming out of their ears and they're wanting to help. That's not really the case here. So I think there is a ton of moving factors as to why Penn State is a little bit behind the eight ball. But that blame definitely cannot go on just Coach Franklin or really anybody in particular. There is a collective. There needs to be a collective agreement between these, big wigs and Pat Kraft and James Franklin of hey, we need to move this program forward, and if we do not put all of our efforts into NIL, we are going to start to see that result on the field. I mean, that's just the reality of it. If you don't play the game, and I'll see some fans on Twitter saying, nah, just don't pay anybody. Forget about it. This NIL is, it's stupid.
Mhm.
And I'm like, okay, when we have 4 wins in a couple of seasons, when you stop paying guys, let's see how much you enjoy that. So clearly, we need to go all the way in. NIL is here to stay. And like you said, even if a CBA comes about, which I think it will, and salaries, which is going to be good. I think the players deserve it. The NCAA has been taking 100% of the revenue for way too long, which I think, as a former player, but even as a fan, I just don't think that was right.
We're going to take another break here in the conversation. Still to come, more NIL hasn't been around forever. So what about all the other seasons where Penn State came up short to Ohio State and Michigan? Who's responsible for that? We'll talk about it next here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, patience. The formula for winning championships is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to its peak performance. From superchargers to roof racks to exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you are looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride each and every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to make your car into that MVP and bring home huge victories. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. That is ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit is only available to U.S. customers.
So I think that coming where it's, maybe 50-50 as far as revenue sharing, that will help a lot kind of ease the pockets, I think, and put some money back in these players' pockets. So I think that will help, but we're still a little bit of a ways away from that because there's a lot of logistics that go into salaries. And now these guys are not student athletes. They're employees if they're on salary. And if they're, as a CBA, and now there's a college football player association that's fighting to further the betterment for college football players. It's essentially just an NFL G League at this point. So I think there's a lot of stuff that's going to change. And then when you start to, and that's where we're headed, I guarantee it by 5 years from now, 100%, there will be salaries, there will be all that stuff. But my question is, how does that change the academic side of it? Because once you're taxed on your scholarship, you're taxed on your clothes, you're taxed on your food, because you're no longer a student athlete, you're an employee. What is that? Do I want to take the scholarship? Do I just want to say, hey, keep your education? I'll be in the facility all day long, working on my craft in the film room, in the training room, on the jugs machine. Do you even want a academic scholarship anymore? Is it? And I think we know that that is so important. That is still the biggest thing. And I can speak to that. Obviously thought I was going to the NFL, and now I'm going to have to use this degree. So I think that would be really sad. And I think a lot of people, it would be hard to move away from that. And especially a lot of these older folks are not very fond of where we're headed in college football. But it's kind of inevitable at this point. And the NCAA, they did this themselves. I think they did it to themselves. And they could have fixed this 20 years ago and started to slowly morph this into what they knew was going to happen. But instead, the NCAA said, hey, we're just going to try to hold on as long as possible and exploit these guys. And it got to the point where the Supreme Court is voting 9-0 on athletes allow athletes to make money. And the Supreme Court votes 9-0 on absolutely nothing. So the fact that they were able to agree on that, I think tells you how obvious it was that the NCAA was in the wrong. So I think we're just going to keep going down this path of, really just more insanity in the world of college football and guys just continuing to make absurd amounts of money. So it should be really interesting, Zach, but a lot of moving pieces. But it's going to be fun to watch this unfold over the next 2 to 5 years and really see where this heads.
You and I have seen the rebuttals on X saying that, well, NIL has only been around for 3-4 years, so James Franklin still is responsible for all the other previous seasons. We're going to talk about that a little further and see if we can come up with any other solutions of how Penn State can remain competitive and be in the top with college football. And let's get back to the discussion about James Franklin over the past decade, right? Because a lot of Ohio State, Michigan fans on that post were saying, well, NIL has been around only since 2021. So who was responsible for games in the previous seasons? Landon, you and I can, let's take a knowledgeable stance on this. Remember what James Franklin came into at Penn State, the height of the sanctions, right? I can't imagine how many qualified candidates really wanted that job. James Franklin and some select others, but he came in and he took the burden of all those, scholarship limits, right? The entire dark cloud over Penn State at that time, and the teams were good, like decent. The teams were decent. Okay, they made bowl games and beat Boston College, right? And they just remained relevant. And then most coaches probably wouldn't have been able to turn the program around in 2 years' time. Then had that breakthrough in 2016, blocked field goal, ultimately won the Big Ten, went on to the Rose Bowl, and then lost that game, a game that I felt like they should have won. But the measuring stick is, did they beat Ohio State? They should have won in 2017, and I know shoulda, coulda, woulda. They should have won in 2017. They should have won in 2018. They were that close, and then 2019 took a little bit of a step back. COVID. We know the impact that COVID had on Penn State football as a whole and a lot of other programs. And now they're starting to finally rebuild and come out on top of that. So James Franklin's tenure has always been this roller coaster, Landon. What he dealt with at the beginning of his coaching career here at Penn State to actually seeing a results pretty immediately, I would say. That would take 6-7 years time with what Penn State had to deal with the sanctions. And then now they're kind of back in that, okay, they're in the top 10, but they're still losing to. And remember, they were beating Michigan. They beat Michigan back-to-back years, and then Michigan kind of figured stuff out, whatever you want to say about, cheating or tampering or anything like that, right? All allegedly, right? But Michigan and Penn State owned Michigan until Jim Harbaugh and them kind of figured it out over the past 3 years in this case. So it's not like Michigan's dominated James Franklin for the past decade.
Yeah. So, I think first off, talking about the sanctions and going back, a lot of people said Penn State was not going to be relevant for another 20 years.
They were done.
This was going to, this program was toast. So, I think first shout out to Bill O'Brien too, came in, wasn't here very long, but he did a really good job. And then, like you said, Coach Franklin was coming up at Vanderbilt, one of the top up and coming coaches, and decided to come to Penn State. And I think he doesn't get enough credit for taking that risk in his career. Because like you said, everybody said Penn State football was done for. So for him to come to a place where they were still facing those sanctions, having a lack of scholarships, people don't realize how big that is, man. We had,
especially without NIL,
exactly, no NIL, and at a certain point, we had a defensive lineman. I think in like 2013, maybe 2012, but a little bit before Franklin. But we had defensive linemen starting on our offensive line. That is how bad we were down bad with scholarships. We just weren't able to do anything. So to take a team that, is starting a defensive lineman and come in and 2-3 years later, you're winning the Big Ten. I don't think anybody would have thought that. So, and I know their fans are saying, hey, that was 2016. That was a long time ago. We need to see more now. So I do get that side of it. But at the same time, there were some facility things that I will say that he also was not put in a good position. Joe Pa, God rest his soul, is Penn State football, but did not do a really good job with the facilities, man. There was a lot of stuff lacking: the weight room, the locker room. There was no really training table.
Living conditions.
Living,
Dorm.
exactly, the dorms. And I took a ton of visits. I mean, this is like 2019, 2020. I took
Right.
a lot of visits to other schools. Not a single school that I went to had us living together in a dorm. And Penn State was the only top school where you had to. And then that's him having to fight university policies. That wasn't his choice. And Franklin was actually really vocal about that, saying, hey, we actually lost the recruit back in the day because his parents said, wait, they're in dorm rooms together. They have to have a roommate. We haven't seen that anywhere else. So he's talked about that. I think
That's the
now,
one that we know of, right?
that's the
There
one that
could
we
have been
know of.
more.
Guys are now able to go right into Nittany Apartments, which are the apartments right next to the facility. So it's nice. They are 30 seconds away and everybody has their own room in there. It's a little apartment. So he has fought and gotten some things better. Training table and all that stuff is coming soon. And we obviously just got a new weight room and locker room in the past. So he's working hard, but he has to fight against a lot of also these people at the top. I mean, we're talking about these top donors and the board of trustees and those guys. They're big time Paterno people. And let's just call a spade a spade. A lot of them are not super fond of James Franklin just because they're still in that, hey, this is Joe Paterno. Obviously we heard about the Paterno field. They all want that. I think a lot of these old heads are still stuck on, hey, this is Joe Pa's place. And we need to collectively say, hey, no, we understand Joe Pa, he built this thing, and Penn State would not be what Penn State is without Joe Pa. But it is now time to put Penn State and Penn State football above all of that. We need to stop letting, other stuff get in the way and say, hey, this is the main thing. Let's keep the main thing the main thing. That's what Joe Pa always used to say. Keep the main thing the main thing. And that is helping Penn State football be the best they can be.
We're going to take a break in the conversation, but coming up next, more analysis on what Penn State struggles with when it comes to NIL. It's coming up next after the break. Today's episode is also brought to you by Monopoly Go. We've all been there, either as a player, as a fan. It's halftime and the scoreboard is not looking so good. You're feeling low. You're not sure if you or your team can pull out a win. But that's when you dig deep. You lift your head up and you say to yourself, time to get back in the game, pull off some bank heists, and take as much money of my friends as I possibly can. That's right, the smash hit mobile game Monopoly Go lets you compete with your friends to get the most riches and the biggest empire. It's the Monopoly you love, but now on your phone, available anytime with tons of new twists, including leaderboards to compare your progress to your buddies. There's so much to do. You can play on countless dynamic Monopoly boards. You can make your friends go bankrupt by smashing their landmarks with a wrecking ball, and you can charge players rent for your iconic properties. You can even work with your friends to open community chests and in tournaments to get extra rewards and climb that leaderboard. So get back out there, put your game face on, and download Monopoly Go. That's Monopoly Go, now available for free on the App Store and Google Play.
So I think Franklin has to fight a lot in a bunch of different realms that makes it harder. I think there's other coaches around college football that just have endless just support and just people, pushing them up, trying to help them. Franklin has to fight a little bit of a different battle than some of these other coaches. So to put a lot of blame on him, I don't think is necessarily correct. Although, like I said earlier, when you sign up and you're the head man and you're making 8.5 a year, you're going to have to take that on the chin. It is on you. Realistically, like I said, it's not all on him. But from a standpoint of blame, he kind of has to take it because when you're the head man, that's what your job. You sign up for that. I know he's working hard trying to find as many solutions to make this team better from an NIL standpoint, from helping our players out and allowing them as best facilities as they can get. But it's a tough battle. He's fighting an uphill battle. So I'm curious to see how his tenure finishes out. Still got I think 7 more years on his contract. So he's got a long time here, and I don't think he's not going anywhere either. Yeah. The fans that are saying either they're not paying $80 million to buy him out or 70. That would have to go down a lot if they actually want to buy him out. And then also who are you going to bring in? There's a ton of people that would want James Franklin as their coach of their university. So it's like when people are like, get rid of him. So it's like, first, okay, who are you going to bring in? And second, we're a top 10, top 15 program pretty much every year. Are you really like that unsatisfied? Now I get the people saying, yeah, but we want those top 10 wins. I understand that piece of it. There is that, but are you willing to take those steps back a little bit and go back and maybe not even be ranked and stuff? Like he's running this program really well with what he has
under the circumstances.
Yeah, exactly. So I think there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot that fans don't really see behind the scenes that James Franklin is having to fight for and fight against. So I think there is that piece of it. But, he's going to have to keep grinding, man, and find a way specifically in this NIL space to get some money flowing for these guys, because it is going – if Penn State cannot start to pump this money in and put a team together where we heard reportedly $34 million for Ohio State to just field this roster, and I think some coaches too.
Everybody, right.
Yeah, it was roster and coaches. But I don't think we're anywhere near that amount as far as our players. So – we need to get on that level if we want to beat Ohio State and Michigan. And I don't think that is the way to do that, is to ask fans for donations or anything like that. You're going to have to go to the corporate level and those big billion-dollar donors and sponsors. That's where James Franklin is going to have to make his money at.
And that's just it. So let's wrap up with those solutions. So you mentioned because the NCAA is doing nothing. They are not penalizing any programs for, again, using collectives as pay for play. They don't care anymore. They're not going after anybody. They're just going to leave it be. If you and what infuriates me the most, and Landon, you probably know about this to an extent, right? That agents are working tirelessly because they get those commissions when they strike an ad deal or an NIL deal at any sort of level, that they are trying to work nonstop to try to get players, because bottom dollar is everything to these agents. So they are working overtime to try to recruit players and say, hey, I can get you at this school with more playing time and a bigger NIL deal. And Pat Kraft admitted this and say, we were getting emails saying, hey, would you be interested in this player at this NIL package? Well, yeah, we are interested in him because he's on our roster. He is currently on our roster right now. So the NCAA is doing nothing. They made it even more convenient for players to transfer. There's almost with the new regulations that go into place at the beginning of August 2024. It allows players to transfer as much as they want, just as long as they are in good standing academically or anything else. If schools want them, they can have them transfer. So there's really no transfer penalties whatsoever anymore. Undergrad, grad, doesn't matter. And then they're basically saying, hey, you can do whatever you want with NIL. Contact players, pay them as much as you want, use the collectives, right? Just as long as and now schools can directly work with players to get marketing deals. So what does that mean for the future of collectives? We don't know. So Landon, you talk about the corporate part of it. I think that's the only solution here. Again, even with the collective bargaining, NIL is still here to stay, because now you're just going to have more money for the players through, salaries, right? The revenue sharing, but it's not like that's going to cancel NIL. It's going to be it's going to be the CBA, revenue sharing, and NIL. So what do you do to solve? Because the NIL is going to be, okay, well, I'm getting this salary at Penn State, but NIL at this school is offering me a bigger bonus. So Penn State, this isn't going away unless the NCAA finally says NIL is done. We don't care. This is the rule. You have the CBA, deal with it. But that's not going to happen.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think everything NIL, transfer portal is just going to continue to, so to speak, worsen from a lot of people's standpoint. I do. The only way, and I would like to see this happen, I'm being honest, I think the NCAA should come in and we need to go the salary route, salary cap this thing. Basically, you can't really take away NIL because those top guys are still going to get, Caleb Williams would still get Dr. Pepper deals and be at the Heisman House and do all that stuff. You can't take that away. But I think you kind of turn away from this, fundraising aspect, I guess. I mean, you still have to fundraise. You're going to have to fundraise the salaries and get that money. But once you're able to pay salaries through the universities, I think there's a lot of other funds you're able to tap into to pay these guys, and it becomes a lot easier. So from my standpoint, I would like to see us go a route with salaries, a salary cap. And then obviously it's just like the league where, hey, if you're a lower level guy, you're not really getting those sponsorships and you're going out and trying to find those little Manscaped sponsorships and that type of stuff. You're not, unless you're one of those big dudes, you're not getting those big time deals. But like you said, I don't think there's any other answer with NIL. The foreseeable future, it's here to stay, and
Unless
there's
the
no other
NCAA
answer.
puts a stop to it.
Yeah,
They
and
can say, no, this is our league and no more collectives. We're doing revenue sharing, CBA, NIL is a thing of the past. They can do that. It's going to take some legislative hoops, but until the NCAA puts its foot down, nothing's going to change.
You're right. It is, and the NCAA has a awful record in court, so I don't think they're winning anything in court anytime soon either. That's another problem. So honestly, some people, the talks are the NCAA is kind of on the way out a little bit. We don't know exactly where this is going to go. It's to the point. It's almost like you're grown up and you're 18 now, and you're like, Mom, Dad, you can't tell me what to do. That's kind of what's happened with these universities and the NCAA. It's like, you can't tell us what to do. The courts say we can do whatever we want now. It doesn't matter. So it's starting to become like, hey, this governing body that the NCAA is and this standing that they uphold, does it really matter? Like, why do we need them anymore? So I don't even know if the NCAA is going to be around in 5 years. There is so much movement in the world of college athletics. Zach, I am really excited to see where this goes, man. It's going to be excited to follow. I think the fans are really going to be interested, and hopefully we just continue to pump out some good insight for them and continue to educate, because we are going to be moving all over the place in the world of college athletics with NIL.
And that's the thing. It's such a jack in the box. You don't know which way it's going to go because the NCAA just came out with this legislation and it could change, by the time college football season rolls around. It's a free for all. There's no rules. It's the wild, wild west. It's a war, and all's fair and love and war in this case. And that's why some programs are really benefiting because they just don't care. Others are trying to play by the rules and be respectful. And it's limiting Penn State, in this case, success with honor, and it's limiting them to an extent. Landon, I appreciate this conversation more than you know, and I hope the fans and the spectators do as well. I can't wait to have you back on the show. I really appreciate it. I encourage everyone to go check out Landon's content as well as subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions if you enjoy these conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams. Landon, you're invited on the show anytime you want to be here. Thanks so much for the time.
Thanks, Zach. Appreciate it.